Just let that music play for a couple extra seconds. You can bring me in while he's still out, no problem. Do it. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Strategy Show presented by No House Advantage. I am Dave Loughran on the Twitters at Lafayette_D, LOUGHY_D, joined as I am every Wednesday by Josh Engleman at Josh Engleman in the Twitter sphere as well. Josh, what's going on, brother?
Licking my wounds, man. Licking my wounds. I thought I was going to have like a decent day yesterday. I felt pretty good about the way that my lineups went. And just, 4-game slate, you end up taking a couple stands on some people just by default. You end up overexposed. Well, I don't want to say overexposed, but highly exposed to just some people. And I took a pretty large stand yesterday on one PJ Washington, and I think that he was probably the worst fantasy player on the slate. So my most exposed player was the worst guy that you could possibly have yesterday on FanDuel, and that stings.
Yeah, I know some things about taking stands as well. On the late slate, went with a decent amount of Terrence Ross because he was projected at like 12% on a 2-gamer. And I'm thinking, all right, you and I discussed it yesterday. He's got a 38% usage rate without all of those guys, 1.35 DraftKings points per minute. Of course, I was a little bit worried about the minutes, surely. Like that's a thing. But he said he was the captain now. He surely was not the captain now yesterday at all. Now, granted, I didn't have him everywhere, but I just I was above the field. And he even with the limited minutes, he just didn't even shoot, Josh. He took like 3 shots in the first half. So I can join you on that. Still ended up in a small profit on the night slate with the 2-gamer, but that's with a 21 from a $7,000 Terrence Ross.
Yeah, and everything else, I was well over the field on Jamal Murray, well over the field on Michael Porter, well over the field on Bogdan Bogdanović, and that was pre-lock too. It got me nowhere because everywhere I had those guys, I hung an 8 or whatever the hell that PJ Washington ended up with. And on a 4-game slate, like it's basically impossible to make up 20 fantasy points at a position. So didn't matter what I had no chance to win. I was standing in my kitchen. I was getting ready to start prepping my dinner. Katie was on her way home. And because I live in North Carolina, I can't watch the stupid Hornets games on League Pass, which don't even get me started on that. So I was like, okay, I actually listened to the audio broadcast. I put it in my headphones. The moment I put them in, they were like, wah, that's a moving screen on PJ Washington. That'll be 2. He was out in 3 minutes. I immediately shut it off. I didn't even have to listen to it any further. And it only got worse from there.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And, to an extent, we were right about Nikola Jokic that maybe Doc Rivers decides to triple him and just throw everyone at him and force guys like Porter, who had a monster game, couldn't miss from 3, and Jamal Murray to beat them, which is exactly what happened. Let me tell you something. If you look at the box score and you look at the stat sheet, you'd say Nikola Jokic's impact on last night's game was minimal. I can assure you that he impacted that game more than any other player, despite scoring less points than most guys in the starting lineup, because they sold out to stop him. They slowed him down, but it opened up everything for the rest of the Nuggets offense, and they couldn't miss.
Yeah, you said it on, like, we talked literally about it on the show. Jokic ended up being +8 in 34 minutes, but in that selling out, we ended up seeing Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray go 10 for 18 from 3. That'll do it.
That'll do it. That's all you need to see. That's it. We'll get into some fantasy cruncher lineup study here. Just take a look at yesterday's slate. It was a weird one for 4 games. And like Josh said, maybe some wound licking, maybe some celebrating, commiserating, whatever you want. I'm happy to do any of that with you. And if you had a great night and you got the Awesemo avatar, be sure to tweet us with that. And oh, dude, see, it's been a tough morning. Got no sleep last night. The wife's got a fever. I was up every 3 hours feeding this damn baby, dude. Every 3 hours. I got a Red Bull, and when I get a Red Bull, things are tough. But Awesemo Hall of Fame Twitter account, right? If you mention them as well, you can mention me and I'll make sure, but we'll put it up on the Deeper Dive stream. We want to shout you guys out. We want to celebrate those wins. Even if you don't have an Awesemo avatar, let us know. And if you're watching these shows and you want us to see it, let us see it for sure. And we'll be sure to do something with it. We want to celebrate when you guys win because it's fun for us too. But if you have the Awesemo avatar and you take first through third in a contest with 5,000 or more people, you get a free month of Awesemo Plus. So at this point, there's no reason not to have that avatar, right?
Absolutely.
You're also winning a free like $100 monthly subscription as well. So bing, bang, boom. Anyway, hit that thumbs up, guys. Hammer that thumbs up as we start this one off. It helps us greatly, but you already know that. Fighting the YouTube algorithm, coming in hot against all of these big companies that have, content that's subpar, but still they got the big name and they got the money. We're going to get there. Anyway, subscribe too. It helps us a ton. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, only like 50% of people that watch the show actually have. Hit subscribe, join the community. We'd love to have you. And if you hate it, unsubscribe. You never have to hear from us again. All right, dude, 10 games. We'll get into this. Let's line up study a little bit. What do we have here from this Tuesday night 4-gamer?
Yeah, so Chino SD taking down the Hyundai K. Played 3 lineups. I think last night was a really great night for the non-150 maxers because of how gross some of it ended up being. For example, of the 47 people that maxed the shoot around last night on DraftKings, 1 of those 47 turned a profit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It was a true beating of epic.
1 out of how many did you say it was?
1 of 47.
Okay, so that's like around 2%.
Yeah. It's not good at all. And if you just look at the top of the leaderboard, first through 10th, basically, is the easiest way to do this. 3 entries, 2 entries, 10 entries, 1, 4, 1, 2, 2, 9, and 2. There's only 23,500 entries in this contest, and the entire top 10 is made up by people that only played 10 at the max. That's just not a great day for the 150 maxers in any way. Main lineup, the winning lineup last night, Russell Westbrook. I don't think that anybody is going to be surprised at that one. He was 78% owned and he was good. Terry Rozier. Obviously, we mentioned Michael Porter went nuts. Rui had a really solid game. DeAndre Ayton went for 36. Reggie Jackson for 32. Luke Kennard for 26 and change. And then the big one, the keys to the castle, if you wanted it. Cody Zeller, 3,800, went for 36.25 fantasy points last night. Played 24 minutes, 7 of 13 from the field, 16 points, 13 rebounds.
Amazing.
Became the value play du jour. You know who didn't become that value play? Alex Len.
He never does. He never does unless he's completely off my radar.
Yep.
Adam mentioned it, though, on the Deeper Dive. He said, hey, a decent pivot, just given the ownership on a guy like Biyombo who might play 15 minutes, is Cody Zeller. And ended up being right. How much of that had to do with PJ Washington, though?
Oh, I mean, that certainly didn't help. But speaking of Adam mentioning that, DM at 8:24 p.m. Eastern last night, I talked up Cody Zeller in GPPs, which is super useful since I don't play GPPs.
Yeah, that's great. But
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, you had seen a lot of spots where Washington was running at the 5, and then even though Biyombo got only 18 minutes, you expect Zeller to get a lot of that run, but he didn't, and most of it went to Washington. So, you say Washington was in foul trouble in only a few minutes?
In 3 minutes, he had 2 fouls and was taken off the floor.
Right. So I'm assuming that contributed a little bit, but listen, you take him when you can get him, man.
Yeah, it was not ideal. If we just want to look at PJ Washington, ended up playing 23 minutes, which is 7 minutes less than I truly expected. Obviously not great. 2 of 5 from the field, 5 boards, and finished with 3 personal fouls. So luckily for us, they yanked him immediately with 2 and then didn't seem to care whatsoever if they wanted to try to work that back. But this is also a guy that played 44 minutes 2 days ago and didn't score. 0 for 7 from the field, didn't have a point in 44 game minutes, which to me is impossible. I think that I could score in the NBA if I played 44 minutes.
Is it just a PJ thing, maybe?
What am I missing?
You said it's PJ Washington, right?
Correct.
Yeah, PJ Washington. The only other player that could do that is PJ Tucker.
Oh, that's fair. Well, PJ Dozier isn't bad.
No, okay, right. But I'm saying the only other player that could go 44 minutes without scoring a point also has the first name PJ or in first initials.
Absolutely. I just wouldn't expect that from a guy that was 7K that day.
I know. Right? Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, PJ Tucker might hang the bagel, but you also paid $3,400 for it.
Yeah, Washington had an entire overtime period to at least do something and still failed. So
that's
remarkable. It really
incredible.
But we got 10 games to get into. So what do you say we dive in?
Let's do it.
Portland and Detroit. Portland Trailblazers traveling to the Midwest here, 7-point favorites, 222 total. A team that was just decimated by injuries early on in the season is getting healthy now, which is like the best time to get healthy, especially considering they found ways to win enough games with Nurkic and McCollum out. Outside of guys like Nasir Little and still Zach Collins, of course, out since the start of the season, this team is fully healthy, Josh. And that's kind of interesting heading into the home stretch. They've got a road spot against Detroit. They're touchdown favorites here. But really, is the matchup good enough from a pace standpoint, from in context to the rest of a 10-game slate, for us to be jumping on guys like Lillard, whose price has actually come down considerably lately, or CJ McCollum, or someone like Nurkic or Enes Kanter?
You could have just said that Zach Collins is out since the start of his career. Basically,
isn't that the truth?
Just permanently injured.
It's true. He is never healthy. And I don't say guys are injury prone. Like, he could come back after this and never miss more than 5 games in a season, but it's been a really rough start to his career.
It really has. Hey, look, Drew Holiday missed a ton of time in the start of his career. Maybe Zach Collins could rebound and then become healthy again. But either way.
You see it in football all the time, right?
Yeah.
Where a player just like his first 3 seasons, he plays 2 or 3 of 16 games, and then he goes 5 straight seasons without missing a game. It happens.
It does. There's not much to look at here for Portland. CJ McCollum obviously back, so prices are a little bit problematic. Now we're swapping out Gary Trent for Norm Powell, so that's another increase in usage to a certain spot. Nurkic is now back, solidifying some of the center spot, but you do want to get him touches as well. We don't have anybody in our public ownership on FanDuel or DK projected for north of 8.7% ownership. Now, I do think that some of these guys are viable as contrarian options. I'll never talk anyone out of $9,100 Dame Lillard on FanDuel. I think CJ at 8,200 or 8K is totally fine. Norm Powell for 6,800 on FanDuel at 0 ownership. Those are guys that I'm willing to take in super large field GPPs. But I don't see anybody on here that you would say is like a core piece or a large priority. It's just not a great spot.
No, I'm with you. 100% don't really think there's anything to look at here and feel great about. You have so many other options to get to. And you know what? The ownership on this Portland Trailblazers team also bears that out. We talk about aggregate ownership. I was shocked on DraftKings. Even given that neither of us really love this team, McCollum's around 6.9% on DraftKings. The next closest player is at like under 2%.
Yeah,
so
it's nothing. There's no ownership there.
I don't know if that holds, but it's not going to go up considerably enough to look at this as a chalk team. So even with that in mind, Josh, you'd say, even though like someone of Lillard's standard or capacity at 9,500 with 0 ownership, almost 0 ownership, it's still not worth taking shots on him just based on what we have for the rest of this one.
I don't mind it in large field stuff. It's because he's Dame Lillard. Like, you know what that's ceiling, and he's still like, 80 any day. He's been down as of late, but he's still at 1.22 fantasy points per minute. So I have, like, if you're entering that the shoot around or whatever the hell that DraftKings contest is actually called, yeah, like to me, like rostering Dame Lillard,
I think it's the DraftKings lottery.
Yeah, for real. If you're rostering Dame in a lineup in that contest, to me, that's perfectly reasonable. You can be pretty chalky elsewhere since he's not picking up any ownership.
For sure. And seriously, if you just look at minutes played without CJ McCollum, I wish it was more, but he's still going to play like 10 or so minutes without CJ McCollum on the floor. So Stotts staggers them enough to where Lillard can still have that monster game. Plus, he leads the league in fourth quarter scoring. That should shock nobody. I think he's second in his second half scoring behind Bradley Beal. So you could come into a game where where Lillard's got like 15 points and 22 DraftKings points after the half, and then finishes with 70.
Yeah, because he had 26 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, he does it all the time. What about Detroit? A little bit of ownership coming in on Hamidou Diallo, who just came over from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Is that reasonable to you, given where he's projected for ownership right now?
No, not even close. Although I understand why it's happening. He's 5,800 on FanDuel, so you can go ahead and throw him directly into the garbage. You don't have to play him at all. To me, it's Jeremy Grant at 6,600 on FanDuel is the best piece of this game. He is picking up ownership, but he's still just sort of the guy for this. Even if he isn't the same guy that he was in those first 6 weeks of the season, 6,600 for Jeremy Grant as the focal point for Detroit is very much in play on FanDuel. Sadiq Bey just looks solid across both sites. The guy that I'd be more interested in, and it doesn't make me feel great to say it, but I would rather get to Saben Lee over Hamidou Diallo on DK. Saben Lee is 4,300, Diallo 4,600. I gave Diallo 26 minutes. I think he played 27 the last time out, but we're not going to have Wayne Ellington tonight. I assume Josh Jackson gets back into the rotation. Kind of duplicative with Hamidou Diallo, at least a little bit. And really, when push comes to shove, if he's 22% owned on a 10-game slate, I just don't want to have that much Hamidou Diallo.
Yeah, I'm with you here. So on DraftKings, even though he's getting that ownership, it's an easy spot for you to come in underweight on. Saben Lee coming in around 14%, and then Grant in that standard 8 to 10% range. Is there anyone you think you'll be over the field on for this team? I guess would be a better question to ask.
Saben Lee on DK is the only guy that stands out to me as someone that I would be over on. I think just based on Jeremy Grant's ownership on FanDuel, the best that I could hope for is neutral.
Okay. Miami. Oh, by the way, did you see the Tobias Harris and Boban Marjanovic goldfish commercial?
I know that it exists, but I haven't seen it.
All right. I tweeted it out yesterday. If you get a chance, you got to, it's fantastic. I love that connection those guys have. And Boban is just like a modern day folk hero.
It's amazing. Something had to make Tobias Harris interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And Boban's just a fascinating character. Check it out. You'll appreciate it. You guys check it out too. Okay. Miami and Indiana. Miami Heat, 1.5 point favorites, 218 total here. You've got no Oladipo, so this man has yet to make his Miami Heat debut.
He's got a cold.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, he's got the sniffles.
Yeah, the Miami flu, maybe.
Yeah. Kendrick Nunn also questionable. So similar scenario that we were presented with last time Miami played. Do you like the Heat today against the Pacers?
I like Jimmy Butler a lot on FanDuel. 9K there, 8,800 on DK.
Really
he's picking up.
Corner. Makes me.
Yeah, I have been a Jimmy Butler truther from the beginning.
Are you serious? Are you serious right now?
I'm a day early for April Fools. Anyway.
Okay. You should have waited. Yeah, I guess you could have waited till. I guess that doesn't work if they don't play tomorrow, huh?
I also didn't exactly plan that statement that just immediately spewed out of my mouth like the rest of the dumb crap that comes out of this stupid squawk box. Anyway, look, I like Jimmy Butler today. He's picking up ownership on both sites, but I think it's warranted. Bam, 9,400 on FanDuel. Don't have any interest there. 8,200 on DK. Slightly more interest in Bam on DraftKings than I do on FanDuel. And then the guy that I think is actually the best play relative to his current ownership, Tyler Hero is picking up no ownership right now. Zilch, nada, nothing. He's 5,700 on FanDuel. He's 5,400 on DraftKings, and his minutes are up as of late. Last 3 games, I believe, for Tyler Hero, 34, 33, 35. He was stuck in this 28-ish range for a while, and his price is now where that was. But now, coming out of that, if he's going to play 31, 32, 33 minutes, I think he's a bit underpriced. And with no ownership, Tyler Hero is the kind of guy that I would like to get a little bit of.
Okay. The Pacers, on the other hand, ownership for them, as I pull this up right now, you guys know how to follow us at the Awesemo.com. All of our ownership projections created, built, used by Alex Baker himself. Awesemo, #1 ranked DFS player. Call him whatever you want. The tools are great. Go to awesemo.com/join and use the promo if you want to get into baseball. Season starts tomorrow. Starting 9, all one word, starting, and then number 9. Jordan will put it up on the screen. That will get you 9 days of Awesemo Plus MLB content for $9. It's a fantastic deal. So it's basically a third of the month for $9. I think you'll want to stick around. But even if you just want to test the waters, jump in, go to awesemo.com/promos for that one. And if you want to do every sport, awesemo.com/join. And then you can jump in for an all access monthly, yearly, weekly, whatever you want. We've got something for everyone, but we have all of the best tools, ownership, player projections. And Josh, I ask Adam every time we do a baseball read, the top stack tool. I asked him, like, did it not change the way you look at MLB? And I think it did for a lot of us.
Oh, fully. It changed everything. When we started looking at that and realizing that we could aggregate our stack ownership and compare it to odds of success from the website and the amount of ownership, it was like, oh, cool. This team is twice as likely to be the top stack as they are in ownership. I wasn't getting to them. Now I can simply just bump this team. And now I'm getting a stack that is wildly undervalued and has basically like the second or third most likelihood of being the best stack. It completely changed the game. My MLB profit chart in RotoTracker from the moment that I signed up at Awesemo.com became dramatically different. I think baseball showed me the biggest change in my skill set. This was the first sport that we really hit when I came on. We were just tailing through the NBA, and then MLB kicked up like basically a month after I started. And getting all of that additional information from Alex full on changed the way that I play DFS.
For sure. Can change the way you play as well. $9 for 9 days, Awesemo Plus MLB subscription with the season starting tomorrow. By the way, I don't know if you'd agree with me. I haven't looked at the numbers, but it feels like baseball is Alex's best sport, at least of the major ones. Just seen him crush it over the years. And so many of our guys have crushed baseball that use these tools. The pros that we've got at Awesemo, the guys that we've got working at Awesemo are using these tools. So use that promo starting 9. All right, man. What about the Pacers?
Oh, the Pacers. So I'm going to pump the brakes at least a little bit on my Karis LeVert love, since that didn't work out the last time. It was very much a Sabonis night. Sabonis and Brogdon in double digits in ownership on FanDuel, as is Justin Holiday once again. I'm not so sure I agree with any of that. Matchups against Miami in DFS are pretty barren in terms of interesting stuff. 217 total is quite possibly the lowest on the slate from what I see. Either way, it's going to be within a point or two of everybody else, nowhere near the high end. So if you get, this is sort of similar to the Portland side. If you get Domantas Sabonis or Malcolm Brogdon, or let's just leave it at Domantas Sabonis and Malcolm Brogdon for right now. If you get any one of those guys in a lineup, you're okay with it. That's not the spot that you're immediately trying to make a change. But to me, there is no value to be found in Indiana tonight.
All right. That makes it easy enough for me. Then let's talk about Dallas and Boston. This could get a little bit more interesting once we get to the Boston side of things. But for Dallas, laying 1 point in Boston, 224.5 total. Of all of the top price players you have on this slate, Harden, you have Giannis, Towns is up in that high 9K range. You've got Randall against Minnesota. Kyrie Irving is active against Houston as almost 14-point favorites. Damian Lillard, the list goes on. Of course, you just mentioned Sabonis. I'm not saying all those guys are great or even in great spots for tonight, but Luka Doncic, where does he rank for you among the likes of Harden, Giannis, and everyone else we've discussed?
So I prefer Giannis for sure on DK at 10.5. He's $200 cheaper. I would just rather get to Giannis. I would rather get to Harden at $200 more expensive than Luka. And these are pretty marginal. Like if I'm forced to rank them, that's how I rank them. It's not that I don't like Luka. I think they all look pretty decent. Like Towns at 9,800 to me is not in the same sort of stratosphere. I'd be more likely to get to $97 Julius Randle. Even De'Aaron Fox at 10K to me is mildly in play, but to me it's Giannis on both sites. Luka ahead of Harden on FanDuel because he's $1,000 cheaper, but on DraftKings it's Harden before Luka.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. Since he returned, he played 28 minutes, which is one of his lowest marks of the season. It was also a blowout against OKC. So in what's expected to be a competitive game, I certainly wouldn't be worried about that, but. That's just one thing that plays into all of the bigger picture. Do you like anything else from Dallas outside of Luka then?
A little bit, but nothing standout. Like Porzingis for 8,500 on FanDuel, I like just because of having to roster 2 power forwards. I don't mind that price. I think he's a bit underowned. I keep going back to Josh Richardson at least a little bit, but I think that he is properly owned around like 10 to 12% across both sites too. And then Dorian Finney-Smith, same sort of story, 3,900 on DK. I think he's properly owned at 10%. To me, Dallas is more filler than priorities, but Luka, Porzingis, J. Rich, Dorian Finney-Smith, maybe a little bit of Maxey on FanDuel. I think those guys are all properly owned. You should be getting one of those guys in a pretty regular amount of your lineups, but they're not like stackable or fun or anything along those lines.
So Evan Fournier played almost 33 minutes off the bench in that debut. And Robert Williams played almost 33 minutes in the starting lineup. I can say this much: Boston, without Jaylen Brown, without Tristan Thompson, and also having Robert Williams play a ton of minutes and Evan Fournier now in the lineup, they look a lot different than they did before. So how do we, and by the way, Luke Cornett getting minutes?
Yeah.
That's a blast from the past.
Well, at least they traded Daniel Tice for nothing. That was smart.
Yeah, I don't necessarily understand that at all. So I'm just looking over this team and seeing a much different dynamic than we had before. Mo Wagner played a couple minutes in the first quarter and just never came back out. So who do you think looks best here? And do you have Jaylen Brown projected in today? Because that's a pretty big factor.
So I do have Jaylen Brown in. I wonder if I should be changing Evan Fournier's first name to PJ, given how absolutely terrible he was in that first run. Look at us bringing jokes back from the beginning of the show. When you're good, you're good.
0 points, 0 for 10 shooting. If you want to, dude, sorry, I know not to cut you off here, but like if you're trying to make an impression among the Boston faithful, right? And they got a pretty serious fan base over there. That is not how you want to do it.
Nope. Nah, that's going to get you a lot of scorn pretty much immediately. It's not going to be good. Awful. Yeah. So anyway, love Evan Fournier today. No, I'm just kidding.
Back to the well.
Robert Williams is a high-end contender for me. I gave him 29 minutes. He's 6,300 on FanDuel, 6,700 on DraftKings. I think he's under-owned at 8% on DK by almost double. I think he's under-owned on FanDuel at 17%. I actually had him showing up in the optimal lineup 23% of the time. I only have him project. He's been at 1.5 fantasy points per minute over the last 30 days. I'm projecting him at 1.38. I don't think that's like some sort of crazy rate. If he plays 29 minutes, he's a lethal fantasy performer given the amount of steals and blocks that he can accrue. So I love getting to Robert Williams. I have no problem paying for 9K Jayson Tatum or $8,700 Jayson Tatum. I don't mind $5,500 on FanDuel Marcus Smart. I see some value there at basically no ownership. And if Jaylen Brown plays, to me, he's perfectly acceptable. No issues there. Not really any interest in Kemba. So if I'm prioritizing these guys, it's Robert Williams is very high, very much a core piece of mine. Jayson Tatum on FanDuel, Marcus Smart on FanDuel, call them like semi-core pieces. They look a little bit worse on DK, but Robert Williams, the clear best option in this game to me.
Dude, he has a career 10% block rate.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
It's crazy. He was my number one contender today. I have him projected for 2.7 blocks in 29 minutes.
It's amazing. And
plus a steal and a half. Yeah.
Well, yeah, his 2.5% steal rate, which is also really good. This year, he's rebounding 20.8%. He's actually not a terrible passer either. He's got a double-digit assist rate. So you're not going to get shot volume from him very often, Josh, but man, can he contribute everywhere.
Yeah. Look, and if he gets going in steals and blocks, every one of the points and rebounds that he gets becomes just like a bonus.
Icing on the cake. Yep.
Right. It doesn't really matter all that much. Like the points and rebounds aren't the piece. You get your ceiling game out of Robert Williams when he blocks 7 shots or something along those lines.
And that's 4 steals.
Yeah. Right. And that's fully possible today. And I think the spot itself is pretty interesting in that, like, Kristaps Porzingis is the nominal big man for the Mavs. He doesn't get fouled a lot. He gained shooting fouls in like 9% of possessions. That's a 30th percentile outcome for a big. So that's a really nice benefit for someone like Robert Williams, who can be at least a little bit foul prone from time to time. He's not really in a matchup where teams are where they soak up a lot of fouls. So I think that gives him a little bit of an extra leg up to stay out on the floor.
Agreed. So if we're talking about Houston and Brooklyn, you've got a 13.5 point spread. I mean, just an awful Houston team. Christian Wood, however, is probable. Mentioned yesterday how insane it was that Kelly Olynyk in that spot start had 25 points and not a single 3. That's one of the strangest things you're ever going to see.
Yeah,
but
very.
We expect Christian Wood to be back in the starting lineup tonight. John Wall's questionable. Daniel House probable. Not that anyone really cares too much about that, but just monster dogs against a very good Brooklyn team. You do have a 233.5 point total, but most of that total is going to this Brooklyn Nets team. So can you get to anything for Houston today, assuming John Wall is also active?
Yeah. So obviously if John Wall is out, we're filling in a lot of extra minutes. And I think DJ Augustine ends up becoming like a really highly owned value play, at least as really the only other point guard that is relevant for this team. Kevin Porter Jr. for 5,500 on FanDuel to me is the clear best option coming out of Houston. He is projected for 18.3% ownership. I have him at 18.4. So perfectly owned as far as I'm concerned. Definitely like getting to Kevin Porter. No one else really standing out all that much. We see Christian Wood only at like 5% owned on FanDuel, 1% owned on DK. He's worth a flyer in GPPs. I think John Wall is worth a flyer if he's playing, maybe a little bit of Jayson Tate, but really it's Kevin Porter on FanDuel and maybe a little bit of Kevin Porter on DK, but I'm not really looking too many other places. This Houston team stinks.
They're bad, really bad. They're one of the worst in the league, even when most of these guys are healthy. Oladipo came over, certainly didn't make a huge impact when he was on the floor. The Brooklyn Nets, on the other hand, are still without Kevin Durant. And it's crazy because Steve Nash, every time he gives an update, he's like, yeah, one more week, maybe another week, maybe 2 weeks. It's really hard to say. The last time Kevin Durant has been active is the 13th of February. So we're going on we were going over a month and a half that he has played. So
too busy talking smack to Rappaport.
Yo, was that a crazy thread or what?
That's bad, man. That's really bad. Somebody's
really,
got to take his phone from him.
Please tell me when you're reading this. You probably disagree, but at first I was like, this can't be him. And then you realize very quickly, KD does that shit all the time. But that was next level. I mean, he just kept going. And the type of stuff he said, too, is going to piss a lot of different types of people off. Not just one type of person, right?
No,
it's
a lot of people.
Yeah. And there were so many people defending him too, but it's like, all right. Now, if you weren't a KD stan, I guarantee you would not be defending whoever else the person was that's saying that type of stuff. No way. Even if you hate Rappaport, I think is annoying too. But,
yeah, I'm not a huge Rappaport fan, but like, I mean, Jesus, don't let other people affect your life so much. Good God. What is the upside to what you're doing there?
He was, and the thing is, he couldn't let it go.
No. Not even close.
You make a ton of money. You're known as one of the greatest players to ever live. And, your downtime has been spent going back and forth with Michael Rappaport. He needs to get back on the court.
Yeah. So like this gets overlooked a lot, but you don't ever see something like this coming out of LeBron James. Like he is such a well manicured and polished, and like, I'm not saying that's good or bad or whatever, but like you don't see that sort of thing. And then meanwhile, KD's got this constantly. Like it never ends.
It's crazy. And I think you would agree.
So sensitive.
You and I are very similar in this sense. Like nothing he said offended me because I just don't take offense to words like that. No. But what I mean is the way that things are today, that is not something that just gets glossed over.
No, and it's not even like about that. It's just a bad look for him personally. It's a negative outlook for his brand, his financial outlook down the line, like his ability to work with other brands. Like it's a really bad look for KD. I don't care what he said at all, particularly to Michael Rappaport. Right. Totally meaningless to me. But it just paints him and no one else in a terrible light.
Yeah, wildly unprofessional and something that like you just have to abstain from. You can't do that stuff. Not that you and I are like could ever run an HR department. As a matter of fact, we probably get fired very quickly from our positions. But the optics there are real bad for sure. So let's see if anything comes out of it. Doesn't really matter today. The biggest question is, what are you doing with Harden? What are you doing with Irving? What are you doing with the Nets?
If KD fought Rappaport, who do you think wins?
So many people were saying KD was like, oh yeah, KD talks like he's big, but he's, 105 pounds, 7 foot tall. I think KD has got the reach and still easily defeats Michael Rappaport. My assumption is Michael Rappaport isn't exactly in tip top shape himself, but I don't know. Maybe he just goes for that Achilles.
I feel like, well, I mean, that's what I would be doing, chopping those tree limbs down. But I feel like Rappaport is probably,
legs, you mean?
Yeah, I feel like Rappaport has probably been in a few scraps and would be like significantly more likely to like fight dirty.
Oh yeah. Oh, if you're talking about just not hand.
I'm not saying they're going to be in a boxing match where KD keeps them at bay with a long jab.
You're saying like Michael Rappaport could bring a tire iron.
I think Michael Rappaport may bring a tire iron.
Well, then that would be a fight I'd like to watch. I mean, it's just straight out of Anchorman, right? Shows up with a mace or something.
Rappaport killed a guy. Anyway, Brooklyn, Harden projected for 25% ownership on FanDuel, 20 on DK. I think he's over-owned on DraftKings just relative to what else is out there, but I am not telling anyone not to play James Harden against Houston today. Like, that's just, those aren't words coming out of my mouth. You want to roll James Harden out there today, 11-5, 12-5, 13-5. I don't really care. He's a threat to go 30, 15, and 15 on this team today. Houston's not slowing him down. Do I think that on paper he is like the best option relative to his current ownership? No, I do not. But if you think James Harden is the best pay-up option today, by all means, go for it because a matchup against the Rockets seems like it's going to go pretty well for him. Kyrie's projected for 2% ownership on FanDuel today and none on DraftKings. So much like I just said for Harden, if you want to play Kyrie, no one else is going to be there, and this matchup does not really get much better. After that, please don't roster anything from Brooklyn.
Yep. Oh, and by the way, chat, Michael Rappaport posting that on Twitter, that's lame shit, but that's Twitter. And if you don't know that stuff can happen, that's the whole point. Like KD being completely unaware that something like that could happen is beyond me. That's what I'm talking about here.
If it's an interaction of like 4 or 5 messages, I don't think Rappaport ever sends
no
it.
way.
But the fact that it's like 6 pages, it's like, fuck it, let's do it. Yeah. Apologies for that one. But like, that's what, the moment that he's up to like 15 straight unanswered messages, it's like, all right, well, he'll pay for this one. He's
telling him where to meet him at. Like, meet me on the corner of, right next to the Starbucks. I don't know. It's nuts. Utah and Memphis, we'll keep diving back into this basketball stuff. 4.5-point favorites against Memphis. 226 total here. Donovan Mitchell out. Jordan, I think I forgot to throw that in the run sheet. If you want to throw that up on the screen, if you get a shot. For anyone that's watching afterwards, after we stream, check all of our shows out in podcast form, by the way. Leave a review, leave a rating. It helps us a lot. But if you don't want to listen on YouTube, you want to be able to close your phone when you're doing something, put it in your pocket, podcast. All of our shows that come out early or during the day that have a shelf life, we got you covered. The absence of Donovan Mitchell, though, it's huge, Josh, and it brings someone like Jordan Clarkson into the picture big time, who is projected for more ownership than anyone else on this slate for DraftKings.
Yep. And while I understand why it's happening, we have no value on the slate whatsoever. So we're squeezing it out of guys in the mid tier. But to take Donovan Mitchell off of a Utah Jazz team, literally everybody gets better. Everybody gets either at least the same minutes or a minutes increase. Everyone gets some sort of usage bump because you're taking out the highest usage guy on the team. It's trickle down effect straight through the line. Everybody looks better. So we've got Gobert double digits in ownership. Conley, very highly owned across both sites. He is the number one contender for me on DraftKings. I actually prefer Conley at 5,800 on DK to Jordan Clarkson at 5,500. They're both projected for 40% ownership. So tomato. Joe Ingles, I think, becomes like the nominal backup point guard here. He's 5,500 on FanDuel, 5,600 on DK. He's a guy you're getting to. Bojan Bogdanovic, Royce O'Neal, the 6 main guys, Gobert, Conley, Clarkson, Ingles, Bogdanovic, and O'Neal. You're just playing a lot of these guys one way or the other. Do I think that they're a little bit overowned? Yes. Do I think that comes down a little bit through the day when we get more news? Like if Zach LaVine ends up out, if Kobe White continues to be out, I do think that we can see the extremes get lopped off a little bit, but there's no way around this. Jordan Clarkson is the first guy you're putting into a cash lineup today. Mike Conley might be second, and you're still not even spending all that much salary. You don't have to overthink this one. Remove Donovan Mitchell from the team, play the rest of the Utah Jazz.
Let me ask you a question about Clarkson though, right? So if he's normally playing like, I don't know, say 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And Donovan Mitchell's normally playing 34 minutes.
Yeah.
All 14 of the minutes that Mitchell's off the floor, Clarkson's going to be on the floor. Okay. So I'm pretty sure if you go back and look, like almost every time Clarkson's on the floor whenever, it's not that he's a direct 1-for-1 sub, but he's going to be out there when Mitchell's not on the floor.
For sure.
So then they're playing. Clarkson's on the floor for anywhere between, say, 10 to 12 minutes with Donovan Mitchell. So those additional 10 to 12 minutes, and maybe he gets a few extra minutes today, are significant. But does it kind of put a damper on the idea that, well, Clarkson benefits, but he's only benefiting for maybe 40% of the time that he normally wouldn't? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with, like, it's more muted for Clarkson than anything else. But in the grand scheme of things, you're still getting him to 30 minutes at a $5K price tag and $5,500 price tag. I do agree with what you're saying. I think the jump is actually bigger for some of the other guys. That's
what I'm saying too.
Yeah.
Not that it's not big for Clarkson, but other guys that are really benefiting, who play most of their minutes with Mitchell on the floor.
Right, 100%. So, like, while I do think that it is at least a little bit muted, getting Clarkson a couple extra minutes is everything you need here to push him clear to the top. And I think that I might even be like a little bit pessimistic with my projection, and he's still a top 10 play across both sites, without a doubt.
Okay. So let me ask you this then. Top options from Utah?
Okay, so I'll give them in order on FanDuel for me, and then I'll give them in order on DraftKings, because I think Utah is pretty clearly the top option today. Yeah, Jordan Clarkson on FanDuel is 1, Mike Conley is 2, and I think they're both very close. Joe Ingles is 3, Rudy Gobert 4, Bojan Bogdanovic 5, Royce O'Neal 6. On DK, Conley is unquestionably my number 1 here. Then I go to Jordan Clarkson. Then I go to Joe Ingles. Then I go to Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, and then Rudy Gobert last at 8,100. He's only center eligible. It's a 10-game slate. You're just a little bit more constrained for center-only guys on a 10-gamer.
So the Memphis Grizzlies, only 4.5-point dogs here. Sure, the Donovan Mitchell news plays into that. Does someone like Joval, who's had a couple monster games recently, or Ja Morant, does anyone against this Utah team that's actually playing up in pace this year, and while they've been great, they have actually contributed to some pretty decent games for opponents? But do any of these guys really stand out on such a large slate?
I think Ja Morant does at 6,800 on FanDuel. I got him projected for 1.06 fantasy points per minute. That's about where he is normally. I just think that his upside is just a little bit higher than the 11% ownership we have him projected for. I like him a little bit less on DK. I think Slow-Mo looks okay for 5,200 on DK. He's only basically 5.5% owned. I think you could double that pretty safely in a GPP. The real question is going to come in here with Grayson Allen is questionable, and I think that he is more likely to be out than in. I have him in for right now, but it's possible that he is out. And we already know that Justice Winslow is out. If Grayson Allen happens to be out, I think we see an uptick in minutes for DeAnthony Melton. I think we see an uptick in minutes for Desmond Bane, with Desmond Bane likely getting the start. Bane went out in the second half of their last game after Grayson Allen left the floor. I think that sort of opens Desmond Bane up to be a value play if he is getting the start. He's 3,600 on FanDuel, 3,700 on DK. On a day where we don't actually have a lot of sub 4K options, a starting Desmond Bane will at least pick up some ownership in that scenario.
All right. So we got 5 down, 5 to go here. Toronto and OKC next up on the docket. Toronto 8-point favorites, 223 total. They've been a team that is very likely to let you down of late, me specifically, but even last game, dude, they got blown out by the Detroit Pistons. It's just nothing's working there. In just a couple sentences, right? Because I know we're short on time. If you were running this Toronto team, seeing what we've gotten from them this year, what adjustments do you make heading into next season? Do you blow it up? Do you keep it the same and just add one piece? What do you do with the Raptors?
Well, I would have traded Kyle Lowry 3 days ago, or however many days. I don't think that bringing Kyle Lowry back and look, they could potentially just bring him back for 1 year, $35 million or something like that, and trade him again next year if you need to. Because I think the core of Lowry, Siakam, Van Vliet, Anunoby, and whatever else you want to put out there is good. Like that is a team that's going to make the playoffs when they normally get to play in Toronto in front of crowds. Like, that's a really good team in the East, one way or the other. I would have gotten rid of Lowry already. I think building around Van Vliet and Anunoby works for me. I like the way that those two guys work off of each other. I would start sniffing around to see what Pascal Siakam can acquire you. It doesn't seem like he and Nick Nurse have a great relationship. I would rather have Nick Nurse than Pascal Siakam moving forward, just organizing this team. So I would start opening up the trade machine and seeing what exactly can you get for Pascal Siakam moving forward, because I think that there would be a line out the door.
There will be, no question. So DraftKings and FanDuel have these guys priced really differently. On DraftKings, Van Vliet, Lowry, or I should start at the top. Siakam, Van Vliet, and Lowry are all about $1,000 separated, so tiered down. Siakam 8,300, Van Vliet 74, Kyle Lowry is 6,300. On DraftKings, Van Vliet and Siakam are both 7,700, Lowry 7,200. So you're basically paying a very similar price or identical price for all of them on DraftKings, and on FanDuel they're all separated by a lot. Does that do anything for you against OKC today?
Yeah, it's the ownership that's really crazy. To me on DraftKings, this entire team is overowned. We've got Siakam at 19, Lowry at 13, Van Vliet at 16, Anunoby at 14, and Gary Trent at 14. I would rather have half of every one of those numbers. So to me, Toronto might be the actual worst team on DK. Now on FanDuel, where Kyle Lowry is 6,300, you can't get away from that if you think that he's going to get back to his normal run of minutes. He's picking up a bunch of ownership. I think it's too much, but he's clearly a good play at 6,300 because there's a lot of upside in that number. We also see Fred VanVleet getting 29% ownership on FanDuel at 7,400. I just don't want that much of him. I think this is the most overowned team on the slate. I am very, very pessimistic on Toronto today. Okay. If you told me one of these guys is in the optimal lineup, I'd be like, okay, that makes a ton of sense. The amount of ownership that they're getting is just way too high.
It does feel that way. Absolutely. And when you're getting, I don't know what it is. Is there a reason for that? Is it just like expectations for this Toronto team are way higher than they should be at this point in the season? I don't know.
I can't figure it out. I had it's been a couple days now, at least, where I've been seeing Van Vliet get this crazy high ownership, and I just don't totally agree with it. It doesn't match. And when I look at how I have these guys projected, I'm right at their like normal per minute rate. So I don't think that I am off all that much. I don't know what's pushing this ownership. I just know that I don't want to have it.
All right. So on OKC, we know SGA is going to be sidelined for a bit. It's probably a good thing in the long term. You've got no Al Horford for the rest of the season, and Lou Dort also sidelined. Add Darius Bazley, who's been out for a while, to the list. And if you want to toss Mike Muscala into that, he hasn't played in like half a month. Mike Muscala has also been ruled out for Wednesday's game. Oof. So even with, this is what I find fascinating about OKC. Now, even with those guys being out, nobody's garnering insane ownership. Svi Mykhailiuk is getting a decent amount. Isaiah Roby's up there. But then Moses Brown, his price on DraftKings is soared above $7,000, making that a lot more prohibitive than he was just a couple days ago, where you're like, sure, I'll pay $5,100.
You should still be playing him. I love Moses Brown again today. 9% owned. I would double that in GPPs. I think he is under-owned for large field contests. Love getting there. Both sites too. 6,700 on FanDuel. I'm going right back. $5,300 Pokusevski on FanDuel. 5,100 on DK. Projected for 5 and 8% ownership. Pokusevski's playing like 32, 34 minutes a game. That's a spot where I'm willing to buy at least a little bit of value. He's been at 0.8 fantasy points per minute over the last 30 days. That's not really like a fun number to see, but I think every day that goes by is going to make him a little bit more comfortable in the NBA. So that's a guy that I think is an incredibly nice contrarian option today. I have him more than 2x the field as of right now. Isaiah Roby is projected to get a bunch of ownership on FanDuel and DK. I agree with that ownership. Svi projected to get a bunch of ownership. I disagree at least a little bit, but I do think that he is a value play that we don't really have on the slate right now. I just think that goes away as we get further down the line. Even Maledon is okay at 5,100 on FanDuel, a little bit less so at 5,600, but Brown, Pokusevski, Roby, Mykhailiuk, those are 4 names that I don't think that I've ever said in that order ever in my entire life and never will again. But today they are guys that I'm going to have, 15, 20% of on a 10-game slate.
Oh, dude, it's so tough with the lack of value. I mean, if you were to tell me, Svi Mykhailiuk is going to be chalky on DraftKings, I'd say, okay, why? And your answer would be, he hopefully plays 26 or 27 minutes. He averages 0.82 DraftKings points per minute. Those are not exact. 0.82 DraftKings points per minute is fine if you're getting me 30 plus minutes, but I mean, what are you projecting him for today? 26 minutes, Josh? 25 minutes?
I gave him 26 minutes.
Yeah.
And he's in my model, like ignoring everything, ignoring game context, just his normal rate is 0.77 fantasy points per minute for me. He's been at 0.82 over the last 30 days. I'm actually projecting him at 0.88 for this game, and I still don't think he's as good as the ownership. So I'm taking the step forward. There's nothing else I could do. If he's not getting there and I'm projecting him over those rates so much, I think something's up with the ownership.
All right. You want to move on to the Knicks and Timberwolves then?
Not really.
well, we're getting off of OKC and Toronto. Knicks 3.5 point favorites, 218.5 total. The Derrick Rose is also questionable for this one. He's got that left ankle soreness. Of course, he was out with COVID for a while, and now he is out potentially with left ankle soreness. Mitchell Robinson's done for a while. The poor guy comes back from a broken bone, and now he breaks another one, Josh. So
I hate it, man.
Is Julius let me ask you, with Julius Randle, the way he has played recently, we all know that he is deserving of that upper echelon in terms of pricing, but still not a ton of ownership today. A lot of that's going to be because we're looking at other guys in that top tier. Is Julius Randle someone you'd come in overweight on, or do you think you'll be pretty equal with the field tonight, around 10%?
So I would be equal on DraftKings, but I do want to let you know that he is projected for 30% ownership on FanDuel now.
Every time he plays on FanDuel, because he's never priced accurately on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Julius Randle for today on FanDuel. I think 30 might be a little rich, but I think being in that 25 to 30% range is perfectly reasonable.
How's he $9,300, Josh?
I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
I know especially in this matchup. Games, but still.
It's a pretty tasty matchup too.
Mm-hmm.
The Nick that I think we need to talk about today, and I don't really know what to make of this, but take this for what it's worth. Derrick Rose is 4,800 on DraftKings. To me, he is the best play on the Knicks at that price tag if he's in. So we saw him play 26 minutes and 29 minutes in the two games he's been back. I don't get the sense that Tibbs is going to start playing him like 14 minutes or backup run or anything. I gave Derrick Rose 27 minutes. We've already seen within the past 4 days that he can play 29. If Derrick Rose is getting you 27 minutes at 4,800 today against the Minnesota Timberwolves, let's call it a revenge game if you'd like. He's projected for 10% ownership on DraftKings. I would double it.
Wow. I kind of like that, though. I have no issues with it. He's a high upside player with a lot of usage, and outside of actually probably above Julius Randle if he plays. He's going to be your highest assist rate player, too. Just one point to make on Randle before we move on to the Timberwolves. The reason I think he's so valuable, especially at 9,300 on FanDuel, and it's not like anyone disagrees, he's getting 30% ownership. Since the start of March, so over the last month, James Harden is the only player averaging more minutes per game than Julius Randle. Now, Harden's averaging 40 minutes per game. It's insane. But Josh, Randle's averaging over 38 minutes per game over the last month. So you're taking someone that is a phenomenal scorer, great playmaker, good rebounder, and averaging like 100 touches per game. It's a bit of hyperbole, but one of the top 10 in touches. And then you're saying play 38 to 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's just...
The ceiling's huge.
And the floor is incredibly high.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So this is something that I'm willing to get to. And I don't think 9,700 is all that crazy on DraftKings either. If he's going to be single digit owned, it actually makes me want to get to him against the Minnesota team in what should be an ugly but close game. So anything else for the Knicks? Any thoughts on Barrett? He's actually top 10 in minutes over the last month. It's just how much do we ever anticipate him doing with it?
Nothing more than a contrarian flyer.
Yeah. Okay. Minnesota Timberwolves. This matchup against the Knicks is just so bad, Josh, on every front.
Only guy that I'm really looking at with any sort of volume would be Jaden McDaniels, who's been playing a lot bigger minutes as of late. Was a huge value play, I believe 2 nights ago, that I actually got right for once. 4,600 on FanDuel, 4,300 on DK, 4% owned on FanDuel, 8% on DraftKings. I'm going probably more than double to both of those numbers. It's not going to be fun. Matchup against the Knicks is about as bad as it gets, but Jaden McDaniels, I think, just because we don't have any value, it's a pretty decent price to try to buy minutes in this game. I don't mind $5,600 Malik Beasley on FanDuel. He was really atrocious their last time out. And for Towns, I think 10-8 on FanDuel is not interesting to me. 9,800 a little bit better, but I just don't have a lot of interest in Towns.
One more thing, and then we can move on here from this game entirely. The Knicks over the last month playing at the fourth slowest pace on the entire season. If you take the whole season and look at the bigger picture, their defensive rating is top 8 over the last month. It's top 5 on the season. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Timberwolves play at the 4th fastest pace on the year, also the 4th fastest pace over the last month, even since they've had Towns back. Their game, they play like 102 possessions per 48. The Knicks are around 95. So massive pace up spot for the Knicks as well. And the Timberwolves are one of the worst defensive teams in the league as well. So don't discount this matchup and the amount of pace that you're gaining as a New York Knicks. So that's all I got for this one, Josh. But what a good matchup it really is for the Knicks and Randall.
Yeah, it's great. I wish that I could get to a little bit more of the Knicks, honestly.
Yeah, understandably, it's a 10-game slate. So maybe it's not enough to get to them with a ton of frequency, but it definitely makes them more appealing than it would on other nights. Sacramento, San Antonio, Spurs are 2.5-point home favorites. 230, nice little 230 total here. Before we get to them against the league's worst defense in the Kings, give us the breakdown for your Sacramento Kings today. Not yours personally, but is there anything you like?
Yeah, so $5,600 Tyrese Halliburton on FanDuel to me is just underpriced. The most owned guy we have on Sacramento, this is just comically incorrect. The most owned guy that we have on Sacramento on DK right now is Hassan Whiteside, who's questionable at 5% owned. Even if we just throw that out, it's 4.4 for home. So, I mean, I think that De'Aaron Fox should be like 10 to 12% owned. He's 3% owned. Love him in GPPs. Halliburton on DK, 3% owned. I think it should be like 11. Love him in GPPs. Same sort of story on FanDuel, but Halliburton's at 8% on FanDuel. I think it should be like 20. I have him at 0.9 fantasy points per minute, 34 minutes, 5,600. I think the price, the position, all of that works. We have De'Aaron Fox at 10K, getting no ownership. Happy to pay up to be contrarian there. He's been fantastic as of late. 1.33 FanDuel points per minute over the last 30 days. If you want to get to Barnes or Hield or Holmes, I don't mind getting to these guys because they just play so much that someone somewhere is going to fall into stats. And if nobody is owned, that's cool with me.
You know what's tough about Halliburton is his peripheral stats are so difficult to predict. And on most nights, you're really banking on him getting points. But he's coming off a 10-assist game last time out against this very same Sacramento team that saw 247 points in regulation. Is Halliburton someone that you're willing to get to at that lower mid-range price point, even though he's just not a guy that's going to contribute much outside of scoring, at least not on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I mean, I want Halliburton from Sacramento more than I want anybody else from the Kings. Okay.
Just wanted to drill down on that a little bit and make sure I was hearing you correctly. So Halliburton is your favorite King.
Yeah. The FanDuel price to me is just wrong. Like, I just want to have more on FanDuel given his minutes. On DK, I think he's pretty close to De'Aaron Fox relative to salary, but just in the aggregate, I would rather have Halliburton as my 1 and Fox as my 2.
All right. So let's say you're being contrarian. You're in a single entry contest. Most of your lineup makes sense. It's kind of chalky, but you want to maybe be different a little in a couple other spots. And you say, all right, maybe here's a good spot to do it. I've got Irving against Houston. I have Lillard against Detroit. No ownership there. Mind you, these guys are not getting ownership. And then I have De'Aaron Fox also not getting a lot of ownership in a 230 total point game or point total game against San Antonio, $9,300. Who do you like most if we're talking about being contrarian at a pay up spot in the lower to mid 9K range?
Fox, not close.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Like well over Lillard, even at, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. There you heard it. De'Aaron Fox. So you just vary wildly from the ownership projected ownership from the field right now.
So I have Fox in the optimal lineup on DK 12.3% of the time. I have Dame at 7, and I have Kyrie at 5. So, basically like twice as frequent.
All right.
Or more.
Sounds good to me. This is why we do this show. Yeah. That's why we look at the ownership and try and figure out, what it's going to look like. And Adam made a point yesterday. I was talking to him in one of our group chats on Slack, and he said, these days it's not even about building the models yourself. It's about being able to take the information and the tools that's available to the public. Of course, most of it behind paywall, but still available to the public if you want it. Whereas several years ago, none of that was available. Being able to take that and find ways to differentiate it and exploit that information to get an edge over the field. And that's why it's so important to look at ownership and say, you know what? I think this is wrong, and this is where I'm going to take a stand today and try to be different on a 10-game slate. And quite frankly, Josh, it feels like very often the Kings are one of those spots that make a really great spot to do so. I just remember talking about it the other day against Washington. You got one of the best matchups, and no one's playing them because they're a little bit pricey.
Yeah, take the minutes, take this incredible matchup when you can. I like getting to the Kings just because of the playing time. The rotation has been set up perfectly as far as I'm concerned.
What are you doing with the Spurs?
Just getting them wrong, I assume. DeRozan, Murray, White, Keldon Johnson are basically 8 to 10% optimal for me on DK, and that's exactly where their ownership is. Those 4 guys are in play. I'll rotate through them. None of them are a priority. I can't really pick one that I like more than the others, and they're all getting the ownership that I think they should get. So I think San Antonio is properly owned in this matchup against the Kings, and I don't really see anybody that I can just pick naturally as the guy I want the most. I guess it's DeMar, but we're quibbling.
Okay. No Lonnie Walker coming back?
No. All
right. We got 2 games to go. Let's make it happen. Not bad time for a 10-gamer, I got to say.
No.
We've been doing a lot better at this, and always appreciate you guys hanging with us throughout this whole thing. Hit that thumbs up. We got not a terrible ratio, but 124 out of 600 people watching. Let's pump that to at least 200. That'll give us a 1/3, a 3-to-1 ratio of watchers to people who liked this video. I'll assume all of you guys enjoy watching it because you're here with us. So show us that you enjoy watching it by hitting that thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. And yes, if you hate the show, hit that thumbs down, but make sure to slam it twice. All right, Josh, 2 games to go, Milwaukee and the LA Lakers. That's a good one, right?
It was really good.
That's a good one.
I like that.
Milwaukee, I actually cannot take credit for that. I heard someone do it once, and I was like, damn, that is really good. I'm stealing it. I wish I could give them credit.
Yeah, oh well.
I don't wish I could give them credit.
No, it's yours now. You shouldn't have said a damn word.
But and by the way, it's great because we have a lot of people that actually do it. Like I'll see it go up and then it'll go right back down. It's pretty fantastic.
That's fun. Bobby
Portis is out. COVID-19 protocols. Only real news here, unless you count PJ Tucker being sidelined, headline news. Bucks are 8.5-point favorites after getting smoked in LA by the Clippers. Back-to-back games at the Staples Center, but now they play the James and Davis-less Lakers in a 222 total game. Talk to me, brother. Where are we going with Milwaukee, if anywhere?
Giannis, my preferred pay-up option. I actually have him a little bit more optimal than the current ownership on FanDuel at 11.3. Came in 20% for me, 18% in the ownership. So he'd be a guy that I'd probably be in like the 25 to 30% range on. Jrue Holiday getting no ownership, 1% owned on FanDuel. I think he looks like a really nice contrarian play. Similar story for $5,300 Dante DiVincenzo, but again, contrarian option only. Giannis for 10.5 on DK is a little bit more muted just because with the fact that you can kind of roster everybody everywhere, every extreme that exists on FanDuel just gets pushed together a little bit on DK. All of the high price guys look significantly more similar because you aren't forced into any particular positional constraints. So I think Giannis is properly owned on DK. But again, Jrue Holiday, 7,100, projected for 3% ownership. I don't understand it. I've got him projected for 1.04 fantasy points per minute. That is basically his normal rate forever. But he's not owned at all against the Lakers team that's not very good. The Bucks look like favorites. He plays 35 minutes a game. To me, what's not to like? Jrue Holiday having a game where he goes for like 45 at 7,100 seems very plausible to me at no ownership.
Do you agree with just extremely low aggregate ownership on the Lakers as well?
Are we doing this now? Are we into the Lakers?
Is there anyone else you wanted to talk about for a minute, Milwaukee?
No, it's just the Lakers today are set up in like a doomsday scenario, and there's a lot to talk about. So okay. Andre Drummond isn't in the DraftKings player pool.
But he is starting tonight.
He is 5,200 on FanDuel.
How does DraftKings not? That doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know.
Well, usually it's FanDuel that forgets to add these guys. So
yeah, unless FanDuel didn't take him out and he's still on like the Pistons still. So yes, he is starting tonight. Let's have this conversation. Andre Drummond, Montrezl Harrell, Marc Gasol. I can't imagine they play any of these guys alongside of each other. Like, to me, they have 48 minutes to figure this out. I have no idea how many minutes Andre Drummond plays today. He hasn't played in a while. I gave him 20. I gave him 24. To me, that looks like a really nice value on FanDuel at 5,200. He could play 18.
I was going to say 18 personally.
He could play 30.
Yeah, he could play 13.
Yeah. Does Marc Gasol see the floor? I have no idea. How does Montrezl Harrell feel about this? Who closes? What happens if they want to go to a stretch lineup? Does Markieff Morris become the fourth center on this team that can also get minutes? I have no idea how to handle this. And all of those questions are even more ridiculous because Drummond isn't even on the damn DraftKings slate.
You're right. It's a doomsday situation, but it's also one that I don't have a terribly tough time avoiding. So if Gasol and Harrell were splitting minutes before, and now Andre Drummond is starting, which is really interesting too, because you're looking at a player who is, I love Andre Drummond from a DFS standpoint. I do. I'm a huge fan of guys that can go for 20 and 20. He's a proficient rebounder. He's great at getting, shot blocker, great at getting steals. He just has insane upside. His ceiling is extraordinary, and so is his floor, as long as he's out of foul trouble, which he's done a better job of lately. But you had Gasol and Harrell splitting the minutes at center. I don't see any reason why you would okay, so you're not playing Drummond and Gasol alongside each other. We can eliminate that, correct?
Yeah. Right.
The only other thing is, can you play Montrezl Harrell and Drummond alongside each other, or can you play Montrezl Harrell and Gasol alongside each other? I just don't see any way that works or any way that makes any sense at all. So if you look at Gasol and you look at Montrezl Harrell on the season, granted, I know Davis being in for a lot of the season can take away from this, but Gasol and Harrell have played 0 minutes alongside each other this season. 0.
Right. Yeah. I actually think that Gasol plus Drummond is more likely, not that it would happen a lot, because Gasol shoots a ton of threes. 60% of his shot attempts come from 3 right now. So at the very least, they're not in the same spot on the floor.
But this is the Bucks, man.
I don't think that this is going to happen at all. But I think that's the more likely combo because Drummond and Montrezl Harrell will occupy the same space on the floor.
Right.
At least Gasol can stretch the floor.
Jeez.
But either way, I don't know how to give these guys minutes. My assumption is Gasol plays less down the road because he's old and you don't need to play him right now.
Do you think Brook Lopez is, if you were to go with his big front court for the Lakers, does Brook Lopez make sense as someone that can just sit behind the 3-point line and maybe get, the problem is his volume is just so low. His shot volume is in the base.
I want to know how much the Lakers were looking to trade Montrezl Harrell at the trade deadline if they knew they could get Andre Drummond.
So, all right, you're giving Drummond 24 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Which means that gives us 24 remaining minutes, assuming none of these 3 centers play alongside each other. 24 remaining minutes between Gasol and Harrell. I'll even give you 7 minutes to toss in and say, all right, maybe 7 minutes with these guys playing alongside each other. Let's just take 7 minutes. Yeah. Then that gives you 55 total minutes. Okay. There's not enough to go around unless one of these guys is completely axed 86 from the rotation altogether.
Yep. I can't imagine that Montrezl Harrell is going to be all that happy if they rotate through guys and sit somebody every 3rd game or something along those lines.
Right.
Gasol on the surface makes the most sense to give limited minutes, but at the same time, he is someone you want to be available come playoff time for certain matchups.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how any of this shakes out. As I mentioned before, I still think that Markieff Morris at the 5 as a stretch option to give a different look is something that could still possibly exist that throws another weird wrench. But the problem really comes down to Andre Drummond is $5,200 on FanDuel. And he's projected for
$7,800 on DraftKings now.
Is he on there?
$7,800.
Okay. So he is officially added to the player pool.
Yep, at $7,800.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about anything on DK. But on FanDuel, if you knew that Andre Drummond was getting like 26 minutes, he would be massively owned because there's no LeBron out there. There's no AD out there. We know that Andre Drummond is going to smash in the minutes that he is out on the floor. He's like a 1.5 fantasy point per minute guy. This is a crazy, crazy spot, and I have no confidence. The fact that he's starting is helpful. The fact that this game starts at 10 o'clock is not.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good on this.
By the way, play Kyle Kuzma, 7,200 on FanDuel. Should be like 20% owned.
All right. Chicago and Phoenix. Before we get there, I'll tell you something that isn't a doomsday situation. It's actually a dream scenario, is being able to play on a DFS site, or in the case of No House Advantage, our sponsor, a player prop site, peer-to-peer player prop site, where you can win money a lot easier than you can on other sites. It's just that simple. You very easily can. And a couple of reasons for that. First, download the app, No House Advantage, check it out, familiarize yourself with it. Peer-to-peer player props in contest GPP style form with guaranteed payouts. Very cool. Unlike DraftKings and FanDuel, where the odds and the lines move throughout the day based on where the action is and based on maybe somebody being injured or someone playing when they weren't expected to, these are static. You're hitting these and you're getting that edge right there against a lot of people that don't even know to pay attention and to compare and contrast these to lines on books where the lines are actually sharp. Alex Baker has also, Awesemo himself, created a player prop tool, the player prop projections, No House Advantage projections, over at awesemo.com, and they're totally free. Even if you're not a premium sub, you want to play at No House Advantage, the tool is free. So is the optimal lineups page, the optimal lineups tool at awesemo.com. All of that is free. And if you use the promo code Awesemo, you get a $20 match deposit bonus your first time signing up. So there are so many reasons to play there. And even if you're looking to hit big one day, right? That life-changing money, in order to do that and consistently put yourself in a favorable position to do so, you have to build a bankroll up. So if you're just finding yourself treading water all day, on thin ice, maybe one would say, because you just keep not gaining. Maybe you gain a little bit, you take a step back, you gain a little, you take a few steps back. Build your bankroll up on a site where it's easier to win right now. That is No House Advantage. Download that app, use the promo code Awesemo. And hell, even if later down the road you want to move that money over to DraftKings or some of that bankroll over there and put yourself in a better position, you can do that too. But it sets you up nicely for success in an industry now that has become way more difficult to win consistently, especially in tournaments. All right, Josh, let's wrap it up. Chicago and Portland. I'll toss it straight over to you after I read this news off. Zach LaVine, according to Billy Donovan, said his LaVine's angle is not great, and the guard is considered questionable for Wednesday's game at Phoenix. Meanwhile, Kobe White with a neck injury is also questionable. Unfortunately, this is a 10 o'clock game.
Yeah, really hard to talk about Chicago right now. The problem is Zach LaVine is 7,200 on FanDuel, and I know he's been a little dinged up, and I'm not entirely comfortable with his actual health, but if he's 7,200 on FanDuel, even in a really difficult matchup against Phoenix, he has to be in play, and you can see that in the ownership. Zach LaVine currently projected for 19% ownership on FanDuel. The next highest number from anyone in Chicago on either FanDuel and DK is 3.5% on $3,600 Patrick Williams, which, spoiler alert, should be way higher. We're searching for value out there today. Patrick Williams is $100 above the minimum on FanDuel. He plays a ton, north of 30 minutes. If you're looking for value, go ahead and roster Patrick Williams. He's not going to be good all that frequently. He's like a 0.7 guy. That stinks. But for someone that is unowned, $100 above the minimum, and likely playing 30 plus minutes, that's a value piece on FanDuel that you can get to. He's 4,100 on DraftKings, and I think he's still viable there too. But again, remember, on a per minute basis, dude stinks.
All right, so
if Zach LaVine ends up out and Kobe White ends up out, like fire up Arcidiacono and Satoransky and Troy Brown probably at the flat minimum on both sites. Those guys are going to look a lot better.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you. If those guys sit, what is the game plan? And I guess I'll throw this to you as well. If LaVine and Kobe White are out, does Nikola Vucevic have any value to you, even in a tough matchup against Phoenix?
Yeah, 8,800 on FanDuel, 9,100 on DK. I think that he just sees a bit of a usage bump. You probably see him get to like 34 minutes in the game too, and they probably run a little bit more through him just because they can.
That's what I'm thinking too.
He's certainly more like, to me, he's fully not in play today. You would need to see LaVine leave the floor for him to get back into contention for me.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. With LaVine off, it makes a big, big difference. But maybe we'll get some news. Listen, I'm not trying to predict anything or read too far into it because coach speak can be absolute nonsense. But when Billy Donovan says Zach LaVine's ankle is not great, it wouldn't surprise me to see this be one of those scenarios where LaVine's ruled out in the afternoon. Like, and there's just no way he plays. So.
And it's not just like him saying it either. Like, it's very clearly not good.
Yes, exactly.
Unquestionably. Yeah.
Yep. And stay tuned for all of our shows throughout the day when we'll let you know what's going on. I mean, you have Live Before Lock that takes you right up to tip off. That is a really important one. Right before that, the NBA Deeper Dive. And then before that, the tip off show. So we go from 4:00 Eastern all the way up till 7, 3 straight hours. Jump in whenever you want, right? Jump in whenever you want. We've got you covered. PJ Live Before Lock tonight at 8 p.m. Then the NBA Late Slate Live Before Lock at 9 p.m. with Spags and Greg Ehrenberg. You can't lose. NHL Strategy Show, the daily game plan for premium subs at 3 o'clock. We got you covered. If you're looking for DFS content, no place to look other than Awesemo's YouTube channel. Last place to look on this slate is the Phoenix Suns, Josh. Is there anywhere to look here?
Not really. Highest owned guy on DraftKings is 5.7% owned DeAndre Ayton. That makes sense to me. Like, I don't see anybody as more than a 5%er on DK. I think that Devin Booker for 8,200 on FanDuel is always sort of in play, especially at 6% ownership. But Paul's at 10, Bridges is at 10. I think those numbers are sort of fine. It's a nice spot against Chicago, but to me, it's really, really difficult to prioritize Phoenix in DFS aspects. So I just don't.
All right. Well, that made it really easy.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that'll do it for us. I love seeing all of those Awesemo logos, those badges next to the Awesemo names.
Me doing both.
It is very cool. We've got some fantastic emojis that are already out. Many more coming down the pike. So stay tuned for that. If you're one of the members, you got to check them out. Use them, mess around with them, have some fun. I love seeing you guys join and just be part of the community. It makes me happy inside. So does hitting that thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Josh, anything else, anything coming down the pike from you or anything that's already out that you think everyone should know about before we say goodbye for the morning?
Yeah, Process Show already out. Go watch that. Contenders videos already out. Go watch those. I'll be back on Live Before Lock again tonight with Greg Ehrenberg. And then keep your eyes peeled for Monday. I think that I'm good to say this now, so I am going to say it. We're adding a third Contenders video each morning. Shout out to Super Draft. They are getting a Super Draft Contenders starting on Monday.
Okay. Putting in that work, aren't we, fella?
Trying, man. I'm trying.
That's awesome. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks as always for hanging out with us. It's the, what's this show called, Josh? The Strategy Show?
It is.
Presented by No House Advantage. That sounds about right. See you tomorrow. Same time, same place.
I want to get another Red Bull.
No, I think now that it's almost done, it's actually working. It's working against me.
Oh, okay. It's doing too good of a job.
Yeah. I haven't drank one of these 12-ounce Red Bulls in a